Imagine you're an adolescent woman, aloof 17 years old, continuing in a bankrupt alternation wagon in Slovakia, March 1972. No windows, 97 added women arranged about you, one brazier of water, one brazier for a toilet. You were told you were activity to a assignment camp. You believed it. You never came home. That alternation was accustomed 997 adolescent Slovak Jewish women and teenagers. The actual aboriginal accumulation carriage of Jews anytime beatific to Auschwitz. The man who fabricated it appear wasn't a Nazi general. He wasn't a soldier. He was a Catholic priest in a continued atramentus robe, the adopted admiral of a nation, and his name was Jozef Tiso. This is the adventure of how one man acclimated God, politics, and the accoutrement of the Holocaust to abort his own people, and how amends assuredly bent up with him on a gallows in Bredlava. Area you're watching WWII Army History Area. We go added than the textbooks above the account, and into the absolute animal amount of Apple War II. If you're new here, subscribe appropriate now and hit that bell. Every adventure we acquaint is history that demands to be remembered. Don't absence a distinct one. Jozef Tiso was built in on October 13, 1807 in Bytča, a quiet bizarre boondocks nestled in the valleys of northwestern Slovakia, a fresh allotment of the sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire. His ancestor was a butcher. His ancestors was acutely Catholic. From childhood, Tiso was agilely exceptional, sharp, disciplined, able in languages, decidedly Hungarian and German. He was the affectionate of apprentice who gets noticed. The bounded abbey did aloof that and sponsored adolescent Tiso to abstraction canon at the celebrated University of Vienna in 1906. By 1910, and he was absolutely advancing Catholic priest. By 1911, he had acceptable a doctorate in theology. Actuality is what historians acquisition absolutely remarkable. Jozef Tiso in his aboriginal years was advised a acceptable man. He ran amusing programs. He fought poverty. He campaigned to join alcoholism amid Slovak workers. His biographer James Mace Ward at Stanford University describes him as addition fatigued to agendas of advance for the country and for the weaker amusing classes, but alike then, active below the acceptable deeds the rot was already ambience in. Tiso abhorrent Jewish alehouse owners for the alcoholism antibacterial his communities. He abutting cooperatives accurately advised to attenuate Jewish-owned bounded businesses. And back he witnessed Polish Galatian Jews during his aboriginal travels. He abreast declared them as associated with filth, disorder, even fraud. This wasn't binding cerebration for the era, but in Tiso's hands, it would one day become policy. Back Apple War I exploded in the summer of 1914. Tiso became an aggressive clergyman with the 71st Infantry Regiment of the Austro-Hungarian Army. A assemblage composed about absolutely of Slovak soldiers. He followed them into the mud, the accoutrements barges, and the acreage hospitals. What's rarely mentioned is this. To keep the account during the war, he wrote that he capital to buck attestant to the contest of the war, he accurate soldiers dying in his arms. He declared war as a about antibacterial force, a cleansing blaze that would strengthen bellicism and abolish shit conflict. Let that bore in. A priest watching men die by the thousands, and what he took abroad from it was that war was purifying. By the end of 1914, Idra's austere branch affliction concluded his aggressive service, but his apple appearance had already been reshaped. He had apparent the front. He had apparent afterlife at automated scale. And instead of dedicating his activity to preventing it, he was now ideologically able to accredit it. Afterwards the war, 4 empires burst about overnight. Russian, German, Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, and Czechoslovakia was built in October 1988. It was a 18-carat autonomous experiment, but it was fragile. 50% Czech, 25% German, 16% Slovak, everybody capital power. Nobody absolutely trusted anniversary other. Tiso, abutting the Slovak People's Affair in December 1918. A far-right clericalist movement founded by Catholic priest Andrej Hinka. By 1927, Montisa was Czechoslovakia's abbot of bloom and concrete education, and he banned the government-provided apostolic apartment, allotment to breach in a Prague abbey instead. The angel was deliberate. He wasn't a politician. He was a priest confined his people. That angel was the best alarming weapon he any time carried. By 1934, he was the party's carnality president. Back Hinka died in August 1938. Tiso bedeviled ascendancy of the affair oral days. alike carrying the acclaim at Hinka's funeral, Advancement Civic Accord, while already acid deals in the shadows. September 29, 1938, Britain and France sat bottomward with Hitler and Mussolini in Munich and handed him the Sudetenland, the adherent German-speaking boundarina of Czechoslovakia. Afterwards, a distinct Czech or Slovak in the room. Czechoslovakia's admiral fled to France. The capitalism collapsed. Slovakia was accepted freedom overnight. And the best able man in a back leaderless Slovakia was Jozef Tiso. On March 14, 1929, Tiso declared Slovak independence. The actual abutting day, Nazi Germany devoured the actual Czech provinces. This was not a coincidence. It was a choreographed dismemberment. And Tiso was Hitler's accommodating accomplice and act of it. What did Tiso get in return? A presidential title, a state, German aggressive protection. What did Slovakia get? A one-affair absolutism dressed in Catholic robes and an aisle beeline into the Holocaust. Actuality is a actuality that should stop every distinct eyewitness cold. The actual aboriginal accumulation displacement of Jews to a wits in history. The aboriginal was not German Jews, not Polish Jews. It was 997 adolescent Slovak Jewish women and teenagers loaded assimilate trains in March 1942. They were tricked. Slovak authorities told bachelor Jewish women they were actually recruited for labor, acreage work, branch work. Families were told their daughters would be safe. Some girls arranged their best clothes. Some brought books. They were beatific anon to a wits. One survivor, Erin Danger, afterwards declared how her adaptation was 90% luck. Her son recalled, "My mother burst, afterwards my bearing and my aunt had to booty affliction of me." The agony never labored her body. Another survivor, Mrs. Zuzana Vesela, recalled actuality loaded into a bankrupt abuse wagon. No windows at all, aloof, a few boards broken off on one ancillary for air, with 2 buckets, one for water, one for a toilet. She apprenticed her eye to a gap in the boards and approved to apprehend the names of the stations as the alternation formed east. She never saw her ancestor afresh afterwards, the alternate access at the final destination. These were not statistics. These were daughters. And Tiso active the paperwork. Tiso's government didn't aloof a bet with the Holocaust. It aloof a bet with the Holocaust. It institutionalized it with pride. In April 1940, the Aboriginal Aranization Law bared Jews of their businesses and property. In September 1941, the Jewish cipher was passed, modeled on Nazi Germany's Nuremberg laws, and the Slovak government boasted it was the strictest anti-Jewish legislation. And afresh comes the detail that defines everything. Slovakia didn't aloof acquiesce this. Slovakia paid for it. 500 Reichsmarks per Jewish person, labeled as a fee for retraining and accommodation. Accretion 10-actor Reichsmarks handed anon to Nazi Germany in barter for murdering Slovak citizens. A government advantageous to annihilate its own people. 2 survivors of those 1942 transports, Rudolf Verba and Alfred Wetzler, Abel Auwitz in April 1944, and produced the Aboriginal abundant Western address on what the afterlife affected absolutely was. Their affidavit abashed the world. But by then, best Slovak Jews were already dead. In autumn 1942, the Vatican's own representative, the Apostolic Nuncio, brought a burning bulletin anon to the Tiso government. The Germans were not sending Slovak Jews to assignment camps. They were murdering them. A Catholic priest was now the arch of a Catholic state, actuality told by the Vatican's own agent that his behavior were bearing accumulation murder. Tiso hesitated, afresh chock-full the deportations, not out of moral outrage, but because of political burden, and because the actual then of 4,000 Jews were still ethnically advantageous to the war machine. Presidential exceptions were issued not because Jewish lives mattered, but because Jewish activity did. This is the moment historians alarmed Tiso's alleged calculation. He knew he had consistently known, and back it became annoying to continue, admitting he paused, abandoned to resume back the political apprehension changed. On October 3, 1944, in the Slovak Burgal of Banska Bystrica, Jozef Tiso abandoned, stood on a date and affianced aggressive decorations to assimilate German soldiers. One of those soldiers was Oskar Derlewanger, a bedeviled criminal, a sadist, and the administrator of a chastening assemblage amenable for some of the best alarming non-combatant massacres of the absolute war in Poland and Belarus. Derlewanger's assemblage would go on to annihilate over 100,000 civilians in the Warsaw insurgents alone. Tiso, a Catholic priest, gave that man a medal, The balloon almanac of the Slovak civic insurgents accurate that Tiso's orders anon led to the arrest, torture, and annihilation of 416 bodies, and the abduction of 30,000 added to German absorption camps. By the end of the war, we added than 70,000 Jews had been abandoned from Slovakia. Added than 60,000 were murdered. Over two-thirds of Slovakia's absolute pre-war Jewish citizenry was gone. As Soviet armament bankrupted in on Slovakia in bounce 1945, Tiso didn't angle with his nation. He ran. He fled through Austria into Bavaria, Germany, afflicted his name to Dr. Jozef Tiso and hid central a Capuchin Abbey in Altötting. American soldiers begin him there in June 1945. A man of God ambuscaded a daft apocryphal affidavit in a monastery. Acquisitive, the apple would balloon what he had done. The apple had not forgotten. The balloon of Jozef Tiso opened on December 2 ND 1946. Prosecutors played footage from the absolved absorption camps, the accumulation graves, the ashen survivors, the gas chambers. The prosecutor afterwards wrote that Tiso was indifferently attractive alongside or at the ground. He showed no remorse. He banned to adjudge Nazi Germany. His reasoning, air-conditioned in its arrogance, was that cogent affliction would attending like an acknowledgment of guilt. Back asked what he would do if history again itself, he said he would act absolutely the aforementioned way. The trial's Archjustice, Igor Daxner, wrote in his verdict, Tiso never did annihilation that could absolve his acceptability as an executioner. On April 15, 1947, the Czechoslovak Civic Court began Jozef Tiso accusable of treason, accord with Nazi Germany, acknowledging the Jewish Code, exceeding the displacement of about 58,000 Slovak Jews, and crimes adjoined humanity. He was bedeviled to afterlife by hanging. He appealed to Admiral Benes for clemency. No abatement came. The night afore his death, Tiso told those about him that he acquainted like a agonize of the Slovak nation. Not a distinct chat about the 997 girls on the aboriginal train. Not a chat about the families broken afar on the alternative ramps. Not a chat about the 60,000 dead. On the morning of April 18, 1947 in Bradlava, Jozef Tiso absolved to the gallows. In his abounding, atramentus accounting apparel captivation, a metal crucifix. An actuality is the detail that history agilely records. The blind was botched. The allurement aperture fell, but the bead bootless to breach his neck. Instead of a quick death, Tiso boring suffocated, abeyant from the braiding for several disturbing minutes. He was 59 years old. To anticipate his grave from acceptable a far-right shrine the Czechoslovak government active in secret, it didn't work. His followers tracked bottomward the grave. Decades later, his charcoal were exhumed and rearied in the basilica in Nitra. Today, some in Slovakia still alarm him a saint, a agonize who sacrificed himself for his nation. The Wilson Center in Washington, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and absolute historians who accept spent careers believe this man accord him an altered title, no saint. Over 60,000 murdered bodies agree. History doesn't consistently end neatly. The man who paid Nazi Germany to annihilation his own citizens died in accounting apparel, calling himself a martyr. But the absolute martyrs were the ones who never got a trial, never got a gallows, and never got a grave. If this adventure confused you, if you acquainted the weight of it, that's history accomplishing his job. Hit like if you accept these belief charge never be forgotten. Hey, subscribe to WWII Army History for abysmal dive histories that go above the account into the absolute animal amount of the deadliest war in history. And bead your acknowledgement in the comments. Should Tiso be remembered as a war-bent, or does history see him abnormally in Slovakia today? We apprehend every comment. We'll see you in the abutting one.